Kennedy Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Alyson, and today I'm joined by someone who needs no introduction because he is a large part of the podcast. It is Ryan Pryor.
It's Ryan Pryor. I'm large. I'm in charge. I'm actually not in charge. I'm on a barge. I'm not on a barge. I'm actually just
You're not really large either.
I'm not large. I'm sitting at my dining room table. I'm here. It's Thursday. Spring break is next week for our school.
Nice.
So it's a good week. I got a half day tomorrow, and none of my kids are coming.
Really?
Yeah, all today they were just like, Mr. Pryor, I ain't coming tomorrow. And I was like, do you think I care?
Are they allowed to do that?
They're not allowed to do it, but what are we going to do? Call their,
do they have parents?
Yeah, if their parents are okay with it, there's literally nothing we can do.
Really?
We can call home. Oh, yeah. I mean, if their parents don't care, and I mean, I'm not, I'm not saying every kid, we'll still probably have 60, 70%, but the seniors, yeah, their parents are
but they'll
screw
get
it.
Tardy and whatnot, won't they? Or whatever you get.
What do you think happens?
Absent.
So what? I mean, seriously, what is that?
If you get however many absences or whatever, then you have to repeat the grade, don't you?
No.
Well, today we're going to talk about the Peace Corps. Before we get to that, what are you going to do for spring break?
What am I going to do for spring break? Caroline and I are going to go down to the beach with some friends of ours who have some condos down there. And we're going to go to Ormond by the Sea, which is down below Jacksonville. Caroline has just come home. She's right here. Hello, Caroline.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the podcast. I am. Anyway, so we're going to go down there for about 3 or 4 days and soak up the sun and the vibes.
Jealous.
It's actually, the weather's not going to be great, but
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I don't know.
But I'm a lizard. I have to bake in the sun. I can literally, when it's the dead of summer, and in the South that is intense, but when it's that, I like to just, when I get home, turn the car off and just bake in the sun.
Oh my God. No.
Jeffrey says I'm solar powered. I just recharge with heat and
that is
all that.
An insane thing that you just said to me, that you're going to sit in your car after this. You're talking about in 90-degree weather, 95-degree weather?
Not for a long time, but yeah, for the 10 minutes after, I'll turn the air off and everything. As long as the kids aren't in the car, obviously. If I'm by myself, then I'll just sit there for a minute.
How do you feel about saunas?
About what?
Saunas.
Oh, I thought you were telling me about some weird class or something you can do.
No, saunas.
I love a good sauna. I love to bake in my own sweat and the sun. Literally, if we're at the beach, I go out early morning and I will stay out until the sun is gone. You're gonna get
melanomas.
Unfortunately, your girls already had 2 cut off. So
oh my God. Okay, maybe we should.
They were precancerous. They weren't.
Well, okay, but maybe we should rethink our relationship with the sun after 2 melanomas.
I use sunscreen, but no, yeah.
She's had
I have to
2
go.
melanomas.
No. They were precancerous. They weren't actually full on. But yeah,
they were precancerous, but they weren't. What? Do you go to tanning beds?
I did in high school, but I don't.
She did in high school. I remember that version of your pictures of you were very orange.
Tanning beds don't make you orange. It's actual
whatever.
Spray tans make you orange. I looked very good in tan. I wish tanning beds were not a bad thing
Caroline has just received 4 different sunscreens. Side note, Caroline, did you know that it was Alyson who sent us the batteries on Amazon? That pack of batteries that we got? That was Alyson.
Y'all were looking for it for 30 minutes before the last episode.
Did you send us a door hanger by any chance?
No.
From Crate and Barrel? Did you order one and not get it?
No.
Mm-mm. Okay, well, we also got a door hanger to your audience. By the way, since they don't know this story.
I forgot we were recording.
Last time we tried to record, by the way, audience members, I didn't have any extra AA batteries for my microphone. Mm-hmm. And so the recording was all...
I bitched about it at the beginning.
You did. You were a little bit upset.
Yeah.
And then Alyson was like, how do you not have AA batteries? And I was like, well, first of all, what am I going to use them on? All of our remotes use AAAs because they're Fire Sticks. Mm-hmm. And she was like, whatever. And then a week later, I saw that there was batteries from Amazon, and I just assumed that Caroline had gotten them because she had heard, or she was like, oh yeah, we probably need them. And then literally we just got on tonight, and Alyson was like, did you use the batteries I sent you? And I was like, those are from you?
I like wrote a cute note to go along with it and everything.
That makes me sad. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just glad you received them and that we're able to record, because if I had not sent you those, it would still be an issue.
Do you need a behind the door hanger?
No, what do you mean? Like, what kind of hanger is it?
It's like a door hanger. Like you put it on the top of the door.
Like a do not disturb? Oh, like
No.
a wreath hanger?
Yeah.
Kind of thing? That's random. That's not even, like, why would you have gotten that? Are you sure that it was your name on it?
I don't know. It just showed
Your
up at the
neighbor
door.
never got to hang their Valentine's wreath because you didn't return their whatever.
Depends on the neighbor whether I'm upset about it or not. One of the neighbors
That's
I'm
true.
not.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. In my opinion, therapy is helpful and necessary for everyone. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And as a special offer to Kennedy Dynasty listeners, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Kennedy Dynasty. You can find a direct link in the notes of this episode. That's betterhelp.com/Kennedy Dynasty, KENNEDY with no spaces. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Carolyn thought about joining the Peace Corps. Speaking of what we were talking about right before she got here.
I could totally see her being in the Peace Corps.
She could be in the Peace Corps.
I could totally see that.
I think she would have a problem with some of the sacrifices. But today we're talking about the Peace Corps.
That was like a burn. Shit.
An accident waiting to happen is what I called this episode. Because an accident waiting to happen.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there's a really fun story about this that I think that we're going to actually end this first episode on, and it'll be the sort of, we'll end it on this one, and then for the second episode, we'll continue on. But in order to understand the Peace Corps, first of all, I just want to know, I read through a book called When the World Calls, The Inside Story of the Peace Corps and Its First 50 Years by a guy named Stanley Meisler. So pretty interesting book. You can find it on Amazon. Much like AA batteries. Yes, you can find AA batteries and this book. And that's pretty much it. Jeff Bezos has kind of given up on the whole thing. He's like, I'm rich enough. I don't need to sell. I'm going to space. I'm going to do all that stuff. Who needs anything but AA batteries and Stanley Meisler's groundbreaking work?
Nothing else.
So
Nothing else is
we're going to start off with you know what we're going to start off with, don't you? What do you think it is? The prelude. Prelude. In the 1950, a guy named by the name of Walter Reuther, who was the president of the United Auto Workers Union, put forward a bold article that was entitled "A Proposal for a Total Peace Offensive." You may not know it, but UAW and auto workers, as well as most unions, had fairly one would call them like leaning socialist, very liberal tendencies, and were very interested in the spreading of goodwill and things of that nature. But basically, what he wanted was the creation of an agency, or you could even call it like an army of young people to fight for humanitarian efforts throughout the world. And this was not necessarily just his idea. After World War II, there were various congressional proposals for just such an organization. There's a guy that you might know. His name was Representative John Kennedy, a Democrat from Massachusetts.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him? Mm-mm. He suggested that young college students would be the perfect demographic for such a force. And one of the things you got to understand is that after World War II, the United States and the rest of the Western world, especially which had been destroyed by World War II, were experiencing incredible amounts of rebuilding and reinvestment, specifically under this thing called the Marshall Plan. So you might have heard of the Marshall Plan, but basically it was the United States' post-war lending program. In fact, I'm not sure if this is true or not, so don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure you could still apply for money under the Marshall Plan. And this plan was basically to help rebuild Europe after the devastation of the war, but also, as a side note, it was there to, how do I put this? Basically instill goodwill amongst the people of Europe to the United States, as opposed to those commies over in the Soviet Union. You see, remember, as we have talked about many times in this podcast, the era after World War II, known as the Cold War, the 40 years between 1950 and 1991, was all about this global economic battle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Basically, both were trying to prove that their way of life was superior. It was basically a grand culture war on the scale of millions and billions of people. And so basically, this Marshall Plan, and as well as all foreign policy in the United States in the years following World War II, was essentially designed to help combat communism, no matter what it was. And we're going to come back around to that, but you've got to understand that's the mindset of most Americans and also American politicians at this time. Mm-hmm. In 1952, one Senator, Brian McMahon, actually proposed an army of young people to act as missionaries of democracy around the world, especially in what we would call now emerging markets. And this, of course, was also compounded by religious organizations, which were, instead of proselytizing just in the United States or around the country, they were now sending religious missionaries around the world. Which, this is not necessarily something we're going to spend a lot of time on, but it's one of the great, I think, double-edged swords of religion, specifically organized religion, and in this case, what we would call Americanization of Christianity, which was sort of this, the combination of the Cold War and Christianity created a Christianity that I think was not what was intended by the early church or by Jesus Christ. That is my opinion. That is my opinion. Certainly not to offend anybody. I'm just saying this is a part of it. There was a great spirit of proselytization, not only, but not just religiously, but certainly politically. And I'm not saying that they were intertwined when it comes to the Peace Corps, but it's almost impossible to discuss this development without talking about the fact that there was a great desire amongst American Christians, because the Cold War was in a lot of ways seen as a religious conflict as well. Communism under the Soviet Union was anti-religious. They were against state any kind of religion, because they felt communists in the Soviet Union felt that religion promoted class division. And other things. So a lot of people in the United States, especially who were more culturally taken by the Cold War, saw it as a religious battle. And so you got to understand that feeling in order to understand why there was such a desire to send young people out around the world, especially to developing nations. The first bill to create the Peace Corps was presented in 1957 by Senator Hubert Humphrey, who you might have heard of before. It was not passed. Sadly died. It just died in committee. That is the end of what we would call the prelude. Now we can go into the interlude.
You will always make it a thing. I love it. Every episode.
Do you have any questions about that? Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any things you want to say, Alyson? Because I
will say, I'm shocked that I have not covered this yet, or that we together have not covered this yet. Peace Corps is such a huge part of JFK's legacy, and
it is. And yet,
this is episode 81, and it has not been talked about on my podcast.
I think the reason it hasn't been talked about is because nobody really talks about it right now. I really think you go to the average person and be like, "What's the Peace Corps?" and they'd be like, "I have never heard of that," or "I don't. That's still a thing?" ? Even its budget, when we get down to it, like when we talk about budgeting, because we're going to talk about how much money it's allocated every single year, is tiny, like 0.005%.
Yeah.
Of the federal budget.
Do you know what I think of when I think Peace Corps? This is terrible, but this is my reference. Is the do you remember in Shallow Hal when her ex-boyfriend works for the Peace Corps?
I do not.
Okay. I'm sure no one listening remembers that either. What do you?
I don't.
What are you
Sorry,
nodding
Caroline
at?
was nothing. Caroline, she was
okay.
asking me if she can make lemonade.
Oh, I want lemonade.
Baby, you can use my lemonade. It's your lemonade too. I keep packets of Crystal Light and Arnold Palmer mix. Arnold Palmers are my favorite drink, and so
Love them. Have you ever done Sprite with lemonade? It's really good.
I do like a Sprite with lemonade. It's Sprite actually makes that now. It's called limonada. Like you
I
can
didn't know
buy
that.
You can buy it in a container. Yeah, you can
Jeffrey
just
and I
buy
used
it.
to ask for that, but no, I love Arnold Palmer too.
Arnold Palmer. So anyway, Caroline was just like she was asking if she could drink some of my powdered beverages, and I said, "What's mine is yours, babe."
Yeah, I was about to say that.
And what's yours is yours. You know, that's a marriage right there. Anyway, sorry, I'm trying not to chew ice.
I'm leaving that in.
So after the So following the Democratic National Convention in 1960, which we've talked about in a couple of other episodes, so I won't go into detail about it. In August of 1960, specifically, Reuther, the guy we talked about earlier, came to Hyannisport to meet with Kennedy and plan a future strategy for his campaign, and basically try to advocate for this idea that he had and wanted to push forward. It was during this meeting that Reuther convinced Kennedy to basically include the Peace Corps as one of his campaign topics, but the promise was never intended or included in any major campaign list or like memoranda or like literature. Mm-hmm. And this actually leads to one of the more interesting stories of John F. Kennedy's career as a politician and also his run for president, which I had never heard of, and I don't know if you have either, because on October 14th, 1960, JFK arrives at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and Kennedy was very, very tired. It was late. It was after midnight, and most of the press had gone to sleep for the night. And so he had no intention at that time of actually, doing anything for the campaign. He was really just there to rest, and they were going to move on to another city the next day. But having heard about the arrival of course, then one of the most popular political candidates in history, 10,000 students gathered outside the student union and began chanting that they wanted to hear from John F. Kennedy. And that they wanted him to speak, basically saying, we won't leave until we hear from Kennedy. And so at 2 a.m., John F. Kennedy comes out onto the steps of the student union or the Michigan Union or whatever it's called, the university, club. I don't know what you would call it. It's the union. It was the student union. And in a totally unscripted speech, completely unscripted, just off the cuff, and I read it earlier, it's pretty short. Kennedy called upon the mass of students and asked, quote, how many of you would be willing to serve your country for the cause of peace by living and working in the developing world? And so he literally puts the Peace Corps into his agenda during an impromptu, unscripted, unwritten speech at 2 a.m.
I've never heard that in my life.
I know, right? And
That's
so I
wild.
figured you would want to put the speech in like right here.
I want to express my thanks to you as a graduate of the Michigan of the East, Howard University. I come here tonight, but I am excited to have to say one or two words on this campaign, which is now coming into the last 3 weeks. I think in many ways it's the most important campaign since 1960. Mostly because of the problems which press upon the United States and the opportunities which will be presented to us in the 1960s, I believe must be seized. And the judgment of the President, the vigor of the Executive, the cooperation of Congress, all these, I think, can make the greatest possible difference.
He challenged the assembled students to work for the United States, and then he mentioned the fact that it was getting quite late and all should go to bed.
How many of you who are going to be doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana, technicians or engineers? How many of you are willing to work in the Foreign Service and spend your lives traveling around the world? On your willingness to do that, not merely to serve 1 year or 2 years in the service, but on your willingness to contribute part of your life to this country, I think will depend the answer whether a free society can compete. I think it can. And I think Americans are willing to contribute. But the effort must be far greater than we've ever made in the past. And therefore, I'm delighted to come to Michigan, this university, because unless we have those resources in this school, unless you comprehend the nature of what is being asked of you, this country can't possibly move through the next 10 years in a period of relative strength. So I come here tonight to go to bed, But I also come here tonight to ask you to join in the effort. This university this is the longest short speech I've ever made, and I'll therefore finish it. May I just say in conclusion that this college, this university, is not maintained by its alumni, by the state, merely to help its graduates have an economic advantage in the life struggle. There is certainly a greater purpose, and I'm sure you recognize it, and therefore I do not asking for your support in this campaign. I come here tonight asking your support for this country over the next decade. Thank you.
Anyway, his call for the creation of this organization was met with cheers and applause, and a petition was quickly signed by over 1,000 students who were willing to serve. But of course, there was far more work to be done. And that is sort of the initial story of how the Peace Corps came to be. Specifically, I think the coolest part about this is that sometimes things just come about. Well, you know, given the last 4 years of political discourse in this country, I think we've all become kind of used to a president that just says things off the top of their head whenever. Mm-hmm. But at the time, this was a huge deal. For Kennedy to announce something so big and something so grand in a speech at 2 a.m., his advisors must have been just probably beside themselves. Like, oh my God, what did you do? Like, What have you done? You've now committed us to this thing. But Kennedy really believed in it. And so did these. I mean, again, you had lots of college kids looking to change the world. And we'll talk about what that looks like in the next episode and how that plays out. But that's how it came to be.
Before we end this episode, Ryan, I want you to tell the people, when you were in college, did you volunteer for anything? Did you do any clubs, anything like that?
I was in a fraternity, yes, and we did charitable work. The most charitable work I ever did was to ride a stationary bike for like 7 hours on the porch of our fraternity house to raise money for child cancer. Here's what I tell people nowadays. People are like, do you do charity work? And I'm like, I'm a teacher in a public school.
Yeah.
And then they go, yep.
You do.
Cool.
You're doing the Lord's work.
Good.
All right. Well, that was fun. The reason I'm splitting it in two is because I am going on a trip next week, so we've got to split it up. So I have content for both weeks, so that's why we're not going to make one long one. It's going to be two of my normal length ones. That was just a little explanation for everybody. So with that being said, I will talk to you guys next week.
Come on and vote for Kennedy, vote for Kennedy, keep America strong. Kennedy, he just keeps rolling.